Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom.
In our top story, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has confirmed his plans to meet U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House this week. This marks Netanyahu's third official visit during President Trump's second term and comes exactly 2 weeks after the ceasefire ending the 12-day war with Iran. The world leaders are expected to discuss the success of attacks on Iran's nuclear weapons program, as well as finishing the war against Hamas in Gaza. Before his departure, Netanyahu briefed members of Israel's security establishment, saying that Iran's defeat opened up broad new regional possibilities for the Jewish state. Turning to Gaza, Netanyahu reiterated that Israel's priority is the immediate return of the remaining 50 hostages held by Hamas and the total destruction of the Iranian-backed terror group. President Trump has called for a swift end to the war with Hamas in order to renew his push to expand the Abraham Accords. Yochanan has more on that.
Yes, Rebekah, negotiations for Syria to join the Abraham Accords and normalize ties with the Jewish state are progressing. Political observers believe that it is just a matter of time until Jerusalem and Damascus forge a historic peace agreement. According to reports in Lebanese media, Syrian leader Ahmed al-Sharaa has dropped the demand for Israel to withdraw from the Golan Heights. This is the first time Syria has relinquished its claim over the strategic territory that Israel annexed after the 1967 war. Al-Sharaa is seeking clearly defined security agreements for southern Syria and U.S. support for his country in exchange for normalizing ties with Israel. Analysts believe that once Syria joins the Abraham Accords, Lebanon and Saudi Arabia will soon follow and finally make peace with Israel.
Israel's Shin Bet security agency led operations against Hamas terrorists in the Palestinian-controlled city of Hebron. This was the largest and most complex Shin Bet mission in Judea and Samaria in the past decade. 60 terrorists were arrested while preparing for imminent attacks on Jews in the biblical heartland. Israeli security officials discovered underground arsenals of firearms, grenades, and stockpiles of ammunition. They also found evidence that members of the terror cells conducted firearms training, gathered intelligence on Israeli targets, manufactured explosive material, and assembled explosive devices with the aim of carrying out terror attacks for Hamas in the biblical heartland.
The White House has completed its investigation into Harvard University. The findings reveal that the once respected institution of higher education willfully ignored the harassment of Jewish and Israeli students in the aftermath of the October 7th Hamas attacks on the Jewish state. A federal task force said Harvard was a willing participant in anti-Semitic harassment of Jewish students, faculty, and staff. The Trump administration released a statement saying the Ivy League school was deliberately indifferent to the severe, pervasive, and offensive harassment of Jews on its campus. It warned that failure to institute adequate changes immediately will result in the loss of all federal financial resources and negatively affect Harvard's relationship with the federal government.
The Hamas terror group in Gaza has offered a reward to anyone who injures or kills aid workers, providing food to the people of Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation has confirmed that Hamas has placed bounties on American security personnel and Palestinian aid workers, offering cash rewards to anyone who injures or kills them. GHF said that 12 members of its local staff had been murdered and that others were abducted by Hamas and tortured for collaborating with the enemy. GHF said Hamas is targeting heroes who are simply trying to feed the people of Gaza. Its U.S. security personnel are some of America's most elite and decorated veterans who are on the ground to protect the people of Gaza. GHF appealed to the United Nations to publicly condemn the targeting of humanitarian aid workers in Gaza. It also requested that the UN partner with GHF to provide food directly to families in Gaza.
Israeli scientists working at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot have published groundbreaking research that can detect early signs of leukemia with a simple blood test. Professors Liran Slush and Amos Tanai submitted their study just hours before an Iranian missile directly hit the Weizmann campus, destroying at least 45 laboratories. Weizmann students and professors raced to gather samples and studies as soon as they were allowed to enter the severely damaged premises. Miraculously, the samples for the leukemia research project survived the blast from the missile attack. The study, which could spare patients from painful bone marrow biopsies, has been published in the Nature Medicine journal.
Israel has announced the return to 7 border communities that were destroyed during the Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023. Essential renovations have been completed in the villages of Re'em, Keren Shalom, Nirim, En Ashlosha, Sufa, Nir Yitzhak, and Netiva Sarah. All military bans have been lifted in these areas, and residents began to return last week. Member of Knesset Zev Elkin was tasked with rebuilding the communities ravaged by the Hamas attacks on Israel. He vowed to restore and develop these villages as a symbol of strength, resilience, and resurrection of Israeli society as a whole.
Iran's top cleric, Grand Ayatollah Nasser Makarem Shirazi, has issued a fatwa, or an Islamic death warrant, for U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tehran's top Shiite official drafted the decree calling for a jihad against the Western leaders, whom he referred to as Moharibs, those who fight against Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. Under Iranian law, Moharibs can face execution, crucifixion, limb amputation, or exile. Middle East experts say the fatwa is a clear act of Iranian state-backed incitement to terrorism.
The Israeli tech sector is celebrating its strongest first half in 3 fiscal years. Despite ongoing wars against the Jewish state, Israeli tech firms raised more than $9 billion in funding in the first 6 months of 2025. This is a 54% jump in investment over the last half of 2024. So far this year, Israel Enterprise Software received more than $3 billion in investments. Cybersecurity raised $2 billion. Financial tech raised $750 million. And Israeli healthcare technology received $620 million in investments. The significant rebound occurred while the Jewish state fought wars on multiple fronts, proving the resilience of the Israeli tech market.
Israeli Defense Forces have conducted a study on the feasibility of restoring Israeli sovereignty over Joseph's tomb in the biblical city of Shechem. In 1998, Israel relinquished control of Joseph's tomb to the Palestinian Authority as part of the Oslo Accords. Since then, the biblical patriarch's burial cave has been repeatedly desecrated and burned by Muslims. Today, Jews can only travel to Joseph's tomb in supervised visits under the protection of Israeli soldiers. Samaria Council Regional Head Yossi Dagan said, after October 7th, it is clear that when we flee from terror, it chases us. Returning to Joseph's tomb will restore security in the biblical city of Shechem and all across Israel.
The Israel Allies Foundation Europe hosted its annual European Policy Summit in the Romanian Parliament. Legislators and chairs of Israel Allies caucuses from across the continent gathered in Bucharest to address the continued legal warfare being waged against the state of Israel in international courts. The summit was opened by Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell, IAF President Josh Reinstein, and former Romanian Defense Minister Gabi Lesh. The program, entitled From Warfare to Lawfare, detailed Europe's persistent legal war against the Jewish state. IAF President Josh Reinstein said, in the midst of war, Israel is facing a renewed wave of legal and diplomatic attacks designed to undermine its legitimacy. He said at this critical time, faith-based diplomacy is more important than ever. We are building a united front of European leaders who are prepared to stand up for truth, justice, and for Israel's right to defend itself.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. He is the executive director of Israel365 Action. Rabbi Wolicki, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh. Honored to be here.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is Israel365 Action.
So Israel365 has been around for more than a decade, really building relationships with Christians worldwide through media and through products from Israel. And we have a news website, Israel365news.com. Israel365 Action began right after October 7th to bring information to the Christian community that could help them advocate for Israel more effectively.
So we're in the Iran war now. That's what everyone's talking about all the time. Very successful. How big a deal is the war, this endgame?
This endgame, I think, is everything. You know, when you think about Western civilization and the challenges to Western civilization. You look at what's happening in Europe with the encroachment of jihadist Islam, and you look at some of the things going on in America with Epic City and the whole controversy down there in Texas. And if you pull back the camera and ask the question, what is the plan for Judeo-Christian Western civilization to push back? How does a moderated Islam come into being? Well, we learned from World War II that the only real way to defeat a radical ideology is to actually defeat it. And I think this is the first opportunity and the first time we're seeing where radical jihadist Islam is actually being defeated. So it's huge.
You know, we sit here and I go around the world speaking and talking to people, and everyone's like, oh, it looks like it's going really bad in Israel, but we're sitting here and we see us wipe out Hamas, wipe out the Houthis, wipe out Hezbollah, wipe out Iran. But obviously it's not us. It's not because Jews are great athletes. It's God going before us in battle. How big a deal is this being able to see God in action?
Well, that's what it's all about, Josh. You know, one of the ironies, the biggest irony about the Jewish people, and this comes right from the Bible, is that the purpose of Israel is not Israel. God tells Abraham to bring blessing to all the families of the earth. He tells the people of Israel at Sinai to be a kingdom of priests. What does that mean? You're not a priest. I'm not a priest. What does it mean about kingdom of priests? What that means is that the people of Israel as a collective, as a kingdom, as a civilization, has a priestly role to bring knowledge of God to the world. How do we do that? God says over and over again in the Bible, when he talks about redeeming the nation of Israel after thousands of years of exile back to our land, and they will know that I am the Lord, over and over again. God reveals himself through the history of the Jewish people. We're just pawns in God's game. But that's what's happening here. God is winning. God is winning. So when people keep their eye on what God is doing with the nation of Israel, God is revealed in the world.
Another thing to keep an eye on is Christian support for Israel. That's winning. You know, faith-based diplomacy is the name of the game right now. How important is that for Christians to see God's hand in everything that's happening here in Israel?
It's everything. Because when Christians refuse to see God's hand on Israel, and we see the pushback right now, every Christian watching this who's supportive of Israel, who knows that the nation of Israel is still God's chosen and God keeps his covenants, knows that there are many Christians who look at them and think that they're wrong. And they say, no, the Jewish people today aren't the real Jewish people, and this isn't really the hand of God. That pushback, think about this, an argument about what should be geopolitics has turned into an argument about theology. Is God a covenant-keeping God? Or is he not a covenant-keeping God? That's the dispute. So Christians who are supportive of Israel are looking at what God is doing and saying, yes, the Bible is true. God is a covenant-keeping God. If God doesn't keep his covenants to Israel, how do you know he's going to keep his covenants to you?
America and Israel back together again. We got to see it a couple weeks ago with the massive attack on Fordow and the other nuclear sites. How important is this for Israel to show the world that the two countries that believe in Judeo-Christian values are now back together in a strong, committed relationship?
The Western civilization has been struggling. The whole Red-Green Alliance, I talked before about jihadist Islam, but the other side of what we call the Red-Green Alliance, the Marxist atheists, jihadist Islam and atheist Marxism teamed up against the Jewish people and against God's plan, against Christians too. They hate Christians as much as they hate Jews because they are against the Bible. The last thing that they could handle in the world is the Bible turning out to be true. So they have to oppose Israel. So America rising up to stand with Israel and to support Israel, the Jewish people in the Jewish homeland, is actually an affirmation of the Bible. It's America affirming that it is still based on biblical principles.
Jews and Christians are celebrating around the world, but not everyone's celebrating. You hear, as President Trump says, kooks like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. They're very upset that we took on the Islamic radical regime. Where is this coming from?
I think it's coming from a biblical place. It's coming from a demonic place, but biblical, in the sense that if you look at Psalm 83, which speaks about war and the purpose of war, and it speaks there about those among the nations who want to deny that the nation of Israel is a nation. It literally says that in the Bible. They want to deny that the nation of Israel is a nation. And then at the end of the psalm, there's this interesting prayer where we ask God to bring shame upon them. Why do we care if they're shamed? Do I care if my enemies are ashamed? It's enough just to beat them. No, we ask God to shame them because if they're ashamed, it means that they'll recognize the error of their ways. So this goes back to what I said before. They're raising all these anti-Semitic and replacement theology tropes about how the Jewish people aren't really the Jewish people because they're digging in because they can't accept that the Bible is actually true, that God keeps his covenants.
Rabbi Wolicki, there are literally tens of millions of people watching the show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
God said clearly in Deuteronomy 30 that after a lengthy exile, the nation of Israel will be brought back to our land and become more numerous and more prosperous than ever before. No other nation that ever went into exile did that. And that is how God reveals himself to the world. We are living in biblical times, in miraculous times. Embrace it, be a part of it, and know that there is only one God and he keeps his covenants.
Thank you, Rabbi Wolicki, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
Located on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, the Gaza Strip could have become the Singapore of the Middle East. However, the people of Gaza chose the Hamas terror group to rule over them rather than choosing to live alongside Israel in peace. In June of 2006, Palestinian terrorists infiltrated Israel through a tunnel in an unprovoked cross-border raid. 19-year-old Gilad Shalit was captured and forced into Gaza through a tunnel. He was held hostage for 5 years. On October 18, 2011, Israel negotiated the release of Gilad Shalit in exchange for freeing 1,027 jailed Palestinian terrorists. One of them was terror mastermind Yahya Sinwar, who had been given 4 life sentences for the murder of 2 Israeli police officers and the execution of 4 Arabs whom he accused of collaborating with the Jewish state. Upon his return to the Gaza Strip, Sinwar was hailed as a Palestinian hero. He was named the leader of the Hamas terror group and began planning the October 7th genocide. Sinwar directed the terror group to divert both its Iranian funding as well as the international aid it receives into expanding the massive underground network of tunnels, leaving the civilian population destitute and hungry.
Hamas has built one of the most sophisticated tunnel systems on the planet, using hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign aid and direct financing from Iran to achieve its terror goals. These terror tunnels are found under schools, hospitals, and UNRWA facilities, and were built with one goal in mind: to be used as staging points to kill as many Jews as possible.
While the residents of Gaza lived in harsh conditions without proper water and sewage systems, Hamas terrorists were building an underground haven equipped with all of the amenities that Gazan civilians lacked. The IDF believes that Hamas confiscated more than 6,000 tons of concrete and 1,800 tons of steel to construct its Gaza terror tunnel network. These materials could have been used to build homes and infrastructure for Gazan residents, but instead Hamas diverted international aid and resources intended to better the lives of the Gazan people to build up their underground terrorist hideout. The tunnel network of Hamas is more intricate than the New York City subway system. Engineering experts with the Israeli army estimate that this underground city of terror could stretch up to 450 miles long. There are more than 5,700 separate shafts leading from private Arab homes, stores, schools, hospitals, and facilities belonging to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency into the tunnels. The Israel Defense Forces have long suspected that the Iranian-backed terror group was intentionally constructing tunnels underneath civilian locations, knowing that the Israeli army would do everything in its power to avoid harming innocent men, women, and children. Now that the IDF is on the ground in the Gaza Strip, military analysts have been able to prove that the tunnels are mainly built underneath civilian safe havens, such as hospitals, schools, and mosques. The IDF also discovered a highly sophisticated data center under the Gaza headquarters of UNRWA. This advanced underground installation was equipped with sophisticated computer hardware, including rooms where Hamas hackers operated massive servers fueled by industrial power banks. The tunnels were built with electricity, ventilation, and high-speed internet. The IDF also found facilities equipped to manufacture and store weapons, as well as living quarters for the terrorists themselves. Some more advanced tunnels were equipped with creature comforts designed specifically for senior Hamas leaders and their families, while others were intentionally sparse. They were used to hold hostages. Some of the tunnels are large enough for vehicles to transport weapons and captives leading from under the Gaza Strip all the way up to and even inside the borders of Israel and Egypt. From the outset of the Israeli Army's Operation Iron Swords, the military understood that the Gaza tunnel system was one of the biggest challenges it would face in the fight to destroy Hamas and to rescue the 250 hostages held inside the tunnels. The plan is to continue this campaign until all of the hostages are recovered and the Hamas terrorists are forced above ground. Hamas terrorists took the supplies intended to build a thriving community and poured all of its resources underground to facilitate its campaign of murder and terror. Now, the only hope for the residents of Gaza is the complete removal of Hamas, as well as the destruction of the terror tunnel network that it built. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
ICEJ is passionate about offering practical help and life-changing opportunities to those in need in every sector of Israeli society. Since Israel's war with Hamas began, Israeli citizens have been negatively impacted economically, with many business owners losing more than 50% of their monthly income. This makes it difficult to keep their business afloat and to provide for their families. Government compensation offers insufficient relief for small businesses, many that are operated by women. The situation is even more complicated for those evacuated from their homes, far away from their customer base. To help alleviate these challenges, the ICEJ is sponsoring business mentorship and giving grants to help small businesses succeed, even in these challenging times.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connecting the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken practical action to stand with Israel, such as helping Jews return to their ancestral homeland of Israel, caring for Holocaust survivors, providing bomb shelters for vulnerable communities, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
היי, קוראים לי שירן עמר, אני בת 36, מאופקים, אימא ל4 ילדים, בעלת עסק של מתנות מעוצבות, ותמיד היה לי את התשוקה לעצב ולעשות דברים שמשמחים אנשים. אז ככה התחלתי ללמוד תפירה, התחלתי בקטן כזה, לעשות כל מיני מתנות כזה לתינוקות בהתחלה, ולאט לאט זה התגלגל, וכזה מפה לאוזן, עוד לקוחה באה וביקשה משהו, וזה פתח אותי לעוד מקום. ולאט לאט למדתי על כל מיני טכניקות של הדפסות, וכל מיני טכניקות כאלה של עיצוב, וזהו, וככה לאט לאט זה פרח וגדל, וב7 לאוקטובר היה מצב יותר מסובך, כי אני הייתי בהיריון, הייתי חודש שביעי. בעלי הוא שוטר, והוא היה צריך לצאת. אנחנו, המזל שהיינו בבאר שבע, ובעלי היה צריך לצאת להילחם גם, כי אמרו לו, אתה חייב לבוא, והוא גם נורא רצה לצאת. ומה שקרה, נאלצתי להישאר בבית עם 3 ילדים ובחודש שביעי בהיריון, כשבעלי לא היה בכלל בבית. העסק היה סגור במשך חודשיים, וככה באמת הייתה תקופה נורא קשה שלא עבדנו בכלל. ומעבר לזה, בכלל, כל מה שהיה פה זה היה נורא. כל הזמן היינו בבית, פחדנו, סגרנו את החלונות, כל הזמן פחדנו שיש איזה מחבל שנמצא בחוץ. היה ממש תקופה, בזכות התרומות הנדיבות שקיבלנו להרים את העסק ככה קצת, באמת, זה משהו שהוא נורא עזר לנו ותמך בנו בתקופה הקשה הזאת. וזה גם כיף לדעת שיש אנשים שאכפת להם, שהם כאילו, הם לא חייבים בכלל. ובאמת הם היו שם בשבילנו, וזה לא מובן מאליו בכלל. תראי, כשזה יהודי ליהודי, זאת אומרת, אוקיי, יש פה איזשהו קשר ככה דם כביכול, אבל כשזה בן אדם שהוא נוצרי, זה הרבה יותר מרגש, כי הוא לא חייב לי כלום, הוא לא חייב. והאהבת חינם הזאת, הדבר המדהים הזה שבן אדם שהוא כאילו, וואו, כאילו, אני אפילו לא יכולה להסביר את זה במילים, כמה זה מרגש, הנה, תרמורת היא, כמה זה מרגש שאנשים כל כך טובים, שיש אנשים טובים בעולם, במיוחד בתקופה עכשיו, שאת רואה את כל האנטישמיות. אז לשמוע שבאמת יש נוצרים כאלה, זה מחמם את הלב, זה מדהים בעיניי, באמת. זה לא מובן מאליו בכלל, כאילו, באמת.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help in various relief projects for families, businesses, and whole communities in this ongoing recovery process. You can help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, provide trauma care to those shaken by the conflict, and help the hardest hit areas renovate and rebuild their communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.